The world of TV is littered with alternate castings which could have tanked hit shows. And now that we've seen what a success these 10 shows were, it is interesting to look back on where they might have gone very wrong. Not that all these castings would have been completely awful per se, and in some cases the actor not cast was just kept on hold, eventually getting a part elsewhere in the series which they nailed into the floorboards. So right, I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 9 disastrous TV castings that almost happened. Number 9, Pamela Anderson as Dana Scully, The X-Files. Kicking off with a weird one, and a rare example of studio meddling being a universally positive move. I know I'm shocked. When Chris Carter wrote the original first script for The X-Files, Pamela Anderson was actually the only woman on his mind. The script was specifically written for her. This draft focused more on her struggling to be taken seriously, the sexism and misogyny in the FBI, and Scully's supermodel looks. A mixture of discrimination, blonde jokes, and the glass ceiling saw her promising career derailed when she was paired with Spooky Mulder on The X-Files. Fox didn't think Pamela Anderson was the right person for the project though, and insisted on Carter auditioning other actresses. And once he saw a different Anderson, Gillian, read for the role, he changed his tune immediately. The script was retooled to be grittier, focusing on Scully's medical training and tenacity. Scully became less of a caricature and eventually evolved into one of the most well-rounded characters in sci-fi television history. Gillian Anderson's brilliant deadpan delivery proved to be the perfect partner with David Duchovny's dry sarcasm, and the pair developed one of the best dynamics on television, though you would be lying if you said you weren't at least a little bit curious about what the Pam files would have looked like. Number 8, Matt LeBlanc as Phil Dunphy, Modern Family. Modern Family was not for everyone. I mean, it was a throwback TV sitcom, wasn't it? With classic setups, cheesy wit, and ridiculous set pieces. It followed on from the 90s laugh track comedy of Friends, mixing it with a mockumentary-style storytelling which they used and avoided in equal measure whenever necessary. If you can look past the slightly camp, almost dated vibe of the jokes though, it was a seriously funny show with a great cast. With bagfuls of Emmys to its name, it's one of the most successful TV comedies ever too. And with this 90s inspiration, it's no wonder they turned to a superstar of that era when casting, and asked him how he was doing. Okay, maybe they didn't do the second part. Matt LeBlanc was offered the role of goofy dad Phil Dunphy, but turned it down, thinking he was just wrong for the part really. Phil has well-meaning childishness, unstoppable enthusiasm, and a lack of common sense. So it's definitely a role with a lot of similarity to LeBlanc's Joey from Friends, isn't it? Considering the huge success Ty Burrell had in the role, LeBlanc's decision to turn it down was probably for the best. And in the end, Ed O'Neill as Phil's father-in-law, Jay, ended up being the sitcom veteran who held the cast together, so it all worked out. Quick question, what do you think's the best piece of TV casting of all time? You let me know down below. Number 7, Richard Lewis as Mork, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy. Now, there's nothing against Richard Lewis with this one. The New York comedian had a strong stand-up career and did a fantastic job in Robin Hood, Men in Tights, amongst many other things. However, considering the role of Mork went to Robin Williams and ended up launching his career, it is hard to see Lewis as anything other than a downgrade here. With so much comedy talent, it is likely Williams would have gotten his big break elsewhere even if he had missed out. But it's better not to take that chance, right? Without Williams playing Mork, we might not have gotten his Genie, his Mrs. Doubtfire, his Patch Adams, his Teddy Roosevelt, and countless other hilarious roles. Playing Mork in Happy Days before spinning off into his own show, the role was only Williams' 6th ever credit. He went on to have a huge stand-up career as well as breaking into Hollywood for major roles, moving on to more serious films later in his career. Had Richard Lewis been able to actually do an alien voice, he might never have gotten the chance though. Lewis' unconvincing space accent, it sounded Danish according to Lewis in his autobiography, saw producers look elsewhere, giving Williams a chance to shine instead. And the rest was history. Number 6, Hank Azaria as Joey, Friends. There were quite a few notable actors who auditioned for Friends. Courtney Cox initially read for Rachel, as did Leah Remini and Jane Krakowski, while Ellen DeGeneres auditioned for Phoebe and Vince Vaughn for Joey. John Cryer also turned down the role of Chandler, so it could have been a very different bunch, folks. Arguably the best casting not to happen, though, was the voice of Mo Sislak, Hank Azaria, as Joey. Not because Azaria would have been bad in the role, but because him missing out allowed him to be later cast as David the Scientist. One of the best recurring love interest in the whole damn show. Azaria was so interested in the role, he actually auditioned twice for it. The first time he felt he completely blew it, so when he heard they were still looking a couple of weeks later, he tried again. It was this second go-around which kept producers interested, and eventually got him a phone call about the role of David. Azaria has since admitted feeling a little bitter watching the first season. I mean, on a rewatch, most fans would probably admit the earlier season doesn't really hold up. He was turned around by the second season though, and ended up playing a fantastic part in the end. Cheers for checking out this video today, my friend, and if you're enjoying your lovely self, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will enjoy yourself more with more What Culture videos, I promise. Number 5. Adam Scott as Jim Halpert, The Office. Just like Hank Azaria previously, this is a great example of a strong audition getting you a part further down the road, even if it's not the one that you actually audition for. Unlike Azaria though, in Adam Scott's case, it wasn't even on the same damn show. John Krasinski ended up getting the role of Jim, of course, and with how iconic his role in The Office has become, it's clear the casting directors made the right call there. Nobody could have Jimmed the camera as well as Krasinski did, and it's difficult to imagine Scott and Jenna Fisher's Pam building as good a dynamic as Fisher and Krasinski did. Not that Scott can't build dynamics well. The audition for Jim ended up getting Adam Scott cast in a lead role in The Office's pseudo-sister show, Parks and Recreation, and on that, he connected with Amy Poehler's Leslie Knope as well as Krasinski did with Fisher. It's not so much that Adam Scott would have been a bad Jim, more that by skipping over him, we got a great Jim in John Krasinski, and got to see Scott do a fantastic job in Parks and Recreation to boot. So casting him as Jim would have been a disaster. Not really, but you get the point. Number 4. Chris Rock as George Costanza, Seinfeld. This one is just an absolute mismatch. Seinfeld is one of the greatest sitcoms ever, and Chris Rock is one of the funniest comedians around when he's on form. And considering Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David set out to make a show about stand-ups coming up with bits for their acts, he seems like a perfect fit, really. The fact is, though, he just isn't. Maybe it's because Jason Alexander was irreplaceably hilarious in the role, but Chris Rock's energy just seems completely wrong for the part. He's far too up there, all excitement, drama, and body language. He actually wouldn't be the worst Kramer in the world, come to think of it. But as George, he's practically the antithesis. With Seinfeld's dry delivery, Kramer's eccentricity, and Elaine's wit, throwing Chris Rock's hyperactivity in there just rocks the boat a bit. Jason Alexander's subtler brand of humor beds into the cast much more naturally. As well as Rock and Alexander, Danny DeVito was also in the running, you know? He feels like he's much closer to what the show needed, but it still feels like Alexander was definitely the way to go. Number 3. Katy Holmes as Buffy Summers, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Katy Holmes was in the frame to play Buffy in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a role which went on to be played fantastically by Sarah Michelle Gellar, of course. It would have been Holmes' first screen role ever, but by missing out, she was able to star in Dawson's Creek instead. She then followed up Dawson's Creek with good performances in flawed movies like Phone Booth, Pieces of April, and Wonder Boys. Once she met and 7 weeks later got engaged to Tom Cruise, though, her career pumped the brakes almost immediately. Between 05 and 08, she didn't actually act at all, and Gellar's career has floundered somewhat since then too, starring in relative misses like Scooby-Doo, Ringer, and The Grudge. But still, Buffy is a character with a massive legacy, and it owes a great deal to Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance. So who knows how well, or not so well, the show would have done without her. Number 2. Matthew Broderick as Walter White, Breaking Bad. A lot of the entries here offer interesting alternate universe castings. LeBlanc in Modern Family, Scott in The Office, and Azaria in Friends would all have still been pretty enjoyable, even if the casting we actually got was far superior. With Matthew Broderick as Walter White, though, we can consider this a serious bullet dodged. Now, it is true that both Broderick and eventual castee Bryan Cranston made their names in comedy, with Broderick best known for things like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Cable Guy, and Inspector Gadget. He did have some serious experience, of course, but it was severely limited. The Stepford Wives is one of the few standouts of his career, and The Cable Guy was originally much darker until he and Jim Carrey combined to give it a comedy tilt. Cranston, meanwhile, was best known for Malcolm in the Middle, though he had featured in the likes of Saving Private Ryan previously. The decision to go with a comedy actor did lull audiences in, and made Walter's transition to Heisenberg all the more compelling. Broderick, though, did not want to play a bad guy, so Cranston stepped in and delivered an irreplaceable masterclass. And number 1, Ewan Rayon as Jon Snow, Game of Thrones. Like Adam Scott and Hank Azaria before him, Iwan Rheon is a fantastic actor who was saved for the perfect role after a stellar audition where he just missed out. Rheon initially auditioned for Jon Snow on Game of Thrones, but ended up making a name for himself as arguably the show's best villain, Ramsay Bolton, instead. There's stiff competition from Tywin Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon, sure, but Ramsay more than holds his own, folks. As the evil Bolton bastard, Rheon took delight in torturing Theon Greyjoy, managing to be comically manic and devilishly sinister all at once. His every appearance on screen made your skin crawl, with Rheon stealing the show every single time. As well as Rheon's fantastic turn as Ramsay, you cannot discuss this casting without bringing up Kit Harington too. Despite Game of Thrones having a huge cast, it was clear as it reached the latter stages that Harrington Snow and Emilia Clarke's Daenerys Targaryen were in the driving seat. Though the final season saw him saddled with poor, flat, repetitive lines, that should not sully the magnificent performance he put in over the course of the series. He was a brilliant Jon Snow from start to finish. It's hard to imagine anyone else in that role, even someone as good as Rheon.